Welcome, everybody, to Education Talk Radio, presented by the American Consortium for Equity in Education. Pleasure to have you here with us today. I'm going to be your host today. I'm Ross Romano. I am the founding program chair of the Excellence in Equity Awards and strategic advisor to the consortium. And I'm going to be doing a number of these conversations with the winners of the 2024 Excellence in Equity Awards for educators, getting to introduce you to them, hear about their work, some of their insights and strategies that are really making an impact all across the country. My guest today for this episode is Eli Marshall Davis. He is an interventionist at Hemphill Elementary in Birmingham, Alabama, where he sits on the leadership team and chairs the MTSS problem-solving team committee. He is a Ph.D. candidate at the University of South Carolina, focusing on teaching and learning with research interest in social justice, epigenetics, and the transformative potential of artificial intelligence in education. He is one of our 2024 winners for the Champion of Equity Special Educator Award. Eli, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, Ross.
I'm going to start with kind of a broad question that you may not be specifically prepared for, but I'm sure you'll have a good answer. Like, what's your philosophy of education? What got you into the profession? What's your approach when you think about the job and what it's all about?
Oh, I had a troubled time as a child in education, being young Black male and having a mom who was 22 years old with 4 children, just didn't have the ability to navigate certain systems or even the knowledge to investigate some stuff that might have not been right. So I got held back in the 4th grade, tested for special education, would essentially start to harbor intellectual inferiority. So I struggled with that. It got to a point where I was getting on dean's lists in college, and I used to think that they were being nice to the Black guy. That was a whole big issue. And once I started to build my confidence and start to recognize that some of the things that we go through are systemic and they weren't caused by me, I started to work towards repairing that damage that had been done. My philosophy of education is to take our ancestors' work and build on it and keep on trying to go towards some kind of liberation. And that's the whole truth.
Is there anything that you can share about what you think it means, the impact that it has on your student, have you as an educator that not everybody might pick up on? I mean, understanding your experience with schooling from being a student and then going through and getting trained and becoming an educator, a lot of those things that are the intangibles, not specifically part of your training, but just having some shared experience or perspective or anything along those lines that makes the case for why I think as a system, we already have this challenge right now with teacher shortage, retention, recruitment, but why it's also important to continue to emphasize recruiting from diverse backgrounds, from underrepresented populations, and getting a wide variety of people entering the teaching profession and not just trying to get more of the same, even if there was enough of the same to staff the profession, which right now they're really.
Not too long ago, I went on this professional development for at the end of the year. And what it did was it kind of how you know something, but you just came across it, but it was like you intellectualized it, but you didn't actually put it into practice.
Mm-hmm.
And during the professional development, I started to see the practice. Then it was the concept of window, mirrors, and sliding doors. Windows being able to look out of, mirrors being able to look at yourself, and the sliding doors is to go into these new worlds, like essentially artificial intelligence. But what I do is I offer students to see me as a mirror who have had to go through this whole educational process in which I internalized something that I didn't have to. And so what I try to get them to understand is that, and I always talk to them, I say, your 15-year-old self is depending on your 10-year-old self. And your 20-year-old self is dependent on your 15-year-old self to do exactly what you need to do so that you can have a better way. I even say that to my son. I have a son that's 26 years old, and I was talking to him yesterday, and I was just saying, hey, buddy, your 30-year-old self is dependent on what you do right now.
Mhm.
So I try to give them the idea, the importance of managing themselves. Sometimes we have to manage ourselves, even as young children, based off of the circumstances. It's a hard concept, sad, but it's the truth. Getting to some kind of level of awareness about their situations.
So I mentioned in the introduction about some of your focuses in your PhD studies about epigenetics, intergenerational trauma. Tell us about that a little bit and what that has to do with education.
Okay, I like to think about education in a very deep way. Like, why is all of this stuff happening? I had this one professor, Dr. Davidovich. I'll never forget that guy. And what he gave us was a system, to be a systems thinker. And then he kept on asking us, what is that a part of? And as I was going through this course, I just kept on asking, what is that a part of? What is that a part of? What is that a part of? Thinking about African American education, teaching in schools that have been historically marginalized. And I just started to go towards reading, got this book by Joy DeGruy, and it was called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And in there, she had a small little section that said epigenetics. And from there, I was like, okay, so what is this? And essentially, it just says that how does the environment basically build the human being, and how does that transfer from generation to generation, not only socially, but also by markers on the genetics that modify the stress response gene. And I was like, oh, okay, so the stress response gene deals with cortisol, and that's the fight or flight. So once you start to get into that, then you start to think about this hyper aggressiveness, this ADHD, students dealing with a lot of anxiety, students dealing with depression. And I started saying, okay, so is there a possibility that some of the things that we're seeing with our African American students, or our students who have been historically marginalized and subjugated, is that a consequence of a historical trauma? And I just was really fascinated. And so everywhere I go, I have that lens.
You're going to tell us how these all relate because on its surface, it might seem separate as the AI. And there's AI in marginalized communities, supporting schools, maybe with teachers whose pathway to teaching was different. Maybe they go through traditional teacher prep, or of course, there's plenty of schools that are turning over teachers frequently and having less experienced people in the classrooms. So how does AI help in those cases? How does it help maybe with curriculum design? How does it help teachers to get better and be better?
Mhm. All right. First of all, I just think that artificial intelligence is a fascinating thing, what it does, and how our society is getting ready to implement it in almost everything that we do. I hear a lot of talk about the Industrial Revolution, and this kind of be like the similar thing that's happening in the Industrial Revolution. And what happens with me is I start to think about, during the time of the Industrial Revolution, my granddad was a man trying to make his way through the world. And what he wanted to do, he didn't have opportunities, even though that he was a World War II veteran, he had a GI Bill, but he did not have the ability to go to college because of segregation.
Right.
Even if he could have gone to college, he had limited opportunities to be able to go. So he chose to become a carpenter. He did pretty well. I think that this is the first time that African American community, people that are of these marginalized communities, have the ability to be able to be at the forefront of something, and also have
Mhm.
access to be able to utilize this for the improvement of themselves. As far as the teachers, I work in a school. My school has about 85% of non-certified teachers, statistically factual, and the majority of those teachers have not gone to teacher preparation. Okay, I get that sometimes people can't pass those tests and they are exceptional teachers no matter what. But I do think that there is a need for teacher education, because
Mhm.
like you asked me in the beginning of the podcast here, what is my philosophy of education? A lot of times when you come from different degrees, you don't even think about that. We need to most definitely think about that. So I think that artificial intelligence has the ability to bridge the gap with content knowledge for, you can use it as a teacher coach when a teacher coach is not around and they need some assistance and need to have some know-how. You can use it for special education, writing individualized plans. As a matter of fact, you could use it as a individualized plan developer for every student in your class. I think that is revolutionary, and how it ties to epigenetics and my journey in education is because it offers us the ability to put repair in our own hands. But will we be bold enough to be able to do it? Because there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of people that want to hold to district initiatives or state initiatives. But what I often say is, if the district knew, the district would have done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot, huge topic, and it necessitates like having the view of the long-term goals of what schools are meant to achieve, largely because that long-term is coming faster and faster because these technologies are evolving so quickly. They're becoming so ingrained. And one of the things I've been thinking and talking to a lot of people about is the initial response, I think, by a lot of the education community was to think about, okay, how are these tools going to be used for cheating? And how do we prevent that? And yes, it's appropriate to consider academic integrity and that, but a lot of those questions, I think the answer is we need to update the assignments and the skills that we're teaching, because if we can just plug a question into a generative AI tool and it spits out an assignment, then that's no longer a marketable skill, right? But also, look, yes, they are a cheating tool, because if you prevent students from learning how to use them, you're cheating the students out of developing skills for success. And what you said is so important about the opportunity to be at the forefront, the opportunity to, instead of worrying about, okay, when is my job going to be eliminated by AI? It's, how am I going to create what the new jobs are going to be? How am I going to create the workforce of the future, the life of the future, right? The differences in professional life, in personal life, in family life. And I think we have to be humble about the fact that we don't exactly know what all these changes are going to be or what these tools are going to be. Some of their shortcomings today, tomorrow could all of a sudden be fixed and rectified, and all these things that we said, oh, they can't do this, now they can. And also, I think a lot of the assumptions, because this probably has been historically true of most technologies, right? That they automate and replace jobs that are considered to be lesser educated or lower skill or whatever, right? I don't assume that's going to be the case with a lot of the AI technologies. I think they can obviate some white collar professions just as easily as others, especially with the efficiency of the access to information and knowledge. It's an opportunity for everybody to really be part of creating what that's going to be, instead of just waiting to see what happens. But that starts in schools. That starts in understanding that, one, students who have some form of privilege, whatever that is, they have parents at home who understand the technology, have some means, whatever, they're going to get access to these technologies. They'll learn how to use them, and they'll have those skills to take with them into the future. Students who might not have that same access or guidance at home, if we prevent them from learning it in school, then they're going to be disadvantaged. And that's going to happen like in the next 1 year or 2 years. It's not going to happen in 20 years. So I guess, leading all this to a question, do you have a message to educators about, to synthesize, okay, here's why this is critical to your mission as an educator, to get informed about these, to not be afraid of them, to learn, right, to learn which ones are useful, which ones are not useful right now, etc. There's differences. Not everything is aligned to the purpose of what you're trying to do right now, and not every tool is equal and all of that. But if we don't investigate and learn and make some decisions and give students the opportunity to also learn how to make those decisions for themselves, then there's going to be some of them that are really left behind as their peers develop these skills.
What I First of all, let me just say that one of the things that you said was that people were worried about cheating. You're coming off of what you have a revolutionary tool inside of your hands, and that's as complex as you can think.
Right.
Is that children or students are going to cheat? As an educator, I think that we need to be able to open up ourselves and to do what we're asking our students to do, and that is to critically think about the world and how we want to engage in it. So what I would like to say to people, teachers, first of all, or superintendents, districts, people, whoever you are, first of all, I do training along with my partner Regina. We do training together on how to incorporate artificial intelligence. And because we have been doing these trainings and we're doing these presentations, I know that there is a level of unawareness that is inside of these educational spaces. And what I want to tell people is, y'all, become aware of what this is. And not only become aware of what it is, start to use it, start to engage with it. Because like I will tell my children, I said, the number one way in which you will never get a concept when somebody is trying to teach you is when you're not paying attention. And I give them an analogy about, I asked them, I say, hey, who all has a cell phone? And they all raise their hand. Then I say, who all have misplaced their cell phone and had to look around? I said, you misplaced your cell phone because you're not paying attention to where you place it down. And then that way you don't know where you have put it. And that's the same thing with knowledge. If you don't pay attention to something, there is no way in which you are going to be able to understand and learn it. What I have to say is we are at the precipice of a new frontier with using artificial intelligence inside of education. And right now, because we are at the foundational level, we get to start to talk about how we design it, how we engage with it. This is the time to show up and show out in a major way with artificial intelligence, and for establishing some level of repair included into that social justice, repair, awareness, and we could design these things to do what we need them to do.
Yeah. And this goes for any subject area, how do we explain the relevance of these concepts and make them real world applicable as it relates to either financial literacy or, right, anything, like the ways that you would use this in your real life that would make students say, okay, now I get it. And I want to know this, versus I'm never going to use it. Same thing with any of these is make it so that they don't want to cheat. They make it so that they believe there's value in the knowledge versus just the grade. Because if we operate as though the only thing that matters is the grade, there's an underlying feeling that there's some competition around it, where there's only a certain amount of students that are going to earn this grade versus everybody can earn whatever they earn. But that's just a representation of the knowledge that you have. But really, it's what are you going to do with these skills and what's that going to create? Okay, now I want to know this because I understand that it's valuable and that worth more for me to actually know how to do this than to maybe take a shortcut or just save myself some time so that I can do something else. But that requires teaching. That requires the dialogue and discussion and talking about, okay, here's why we want to know this and here's what it's going to mean. And there's going to be less brain power that has to be expended on trying to prevent, catch cheating, because there just won't be an incentive Again, none of this is meant to downplay the importance of academic integrity, but it's that if that's the focus, that's deficit thinking to me. Okay, how do we prevent this bad thing from happening versus what are all the good things we could possibly do if we come up with some new ideas?
Ideas become antiquated. You know what I mean? And so if your assignment is you are able to cheat on the assignment, then we really need to investigate whether or not that's a good assignment or is
Right,
that antiquated. And then because we don't want to teach our children antiquated ideas, do we?
right.
No.
No. Eli, as we're closing here, let me ask you this. In the next 5 years or so, is there something that you would love to see change or embraced more in our schools in general? More educators doing and getting to know about it that you think would improve learning environment?
That goes into that epigenetics and intergenerational trauma. What does historical and intergenerational trauma do to the human body, and how does it show up inside of our schools, especially in these communities like where the school I teach at, where is Hemphill. And I was looking up RC Hemphill, and the school was named in Alabama in the 1800s. And environments play a critical role in how we are shaped and how we view ourselves and how we are constructed to be a functional participant inside of our America. My thing is, I would love to see to that take that brain power that you were talking about that these artificial intelligence is going to release, right? Take that brain power and start to focus on healing, especially people who have been traumatized on a historical level, a collective level, in which, like African American people, there has never been a time in which we have collectively repaired. Never. As if we are that strong that we can be traumatized for hundreds and hundreds of years, be released from bondage, and then walk with our head up, back straight, and have nothing wrong with us.
Right. Awesome. So Eli, thanks so much for being here. Listeners, if you go to ace-ed.org/EIE 2024, you can learn more about Eli, about all of our award winners from last year. They each have their own webpage, tells you a lot more about their work, where to connect with them. You can also connect with Eli on Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it nowadays. It's always going to be Twitter to me. Or you can connect with me. We'll put that information below in the show notes if you'd like to connect. Eli, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Ross.